What is up, Phoenix family? I'm Ross Cessna, your effervescent and omnipresent host. We're about to go on an esoteric and occult odyssey. This isn't the designer spirituality that is polluting pop culture. It's your opportunity to explore age-old wisdom in the raw. With no further delay, I present to you the Spiritual Phoenix Podcast. What is up, everybody? We have the lovely Stefanie Caponi here with us today. Stefanie, what's up?
Hey, Ross. How are you? I'm doing fantastic. Thank you.
I'm doing well, except I'm drinking tea in my incredibly hot room. I don't know what my problem is.
I feel like we're now into officially fall, but the weather doesn't seem to want to get with the program. It's been like record heat waves this weekend.
Yeah, global warming doesn't exist, though, or climate change.
Not at all.
Just a weird coincidence.
Yeah. How about all those little kids? Like, sorry to go off on a tangent, but like, how about all these like young kids getting like on the climate change bandwagon?
I'm not even aware of it. Like, I don't watch the news or anything like that. I'm completely ostracized from what's going on in the world.
Oh, there's like a huge movement. Gen Z is like all about climate change in a way that I haven't seen since like I was a little kid, and it was more tied to like the early 90s like neo hippie movement.
I remember all that stuff, like Captain Planet, and like even like for my fourth grade play we sang a song about recycling and conserving water and shit like that. It's good that the next generation is actually doing something about it, though.
I think that they actually like see the gravity of it. I mean, I remember being young and thinking about like having kids and then being like, I don't want to bring a child into this world. There's not going to be a world for them. Mm-hmm. And now these, young kids are seeing like, oh, these old people are worried about their social security. Like we're worried that we're not going to have like a habitat. So yeah, I think it's really interesting.
That really is. I mean, it's inspiring, and it is one of those things. I saw something before. It's not, I don't remember the quote, but it was basically about what we leave for people. It's not like leaving it behind. Like, I don't remember. I can't think of it clearly, but okay. It was an interesting thing, whatever it was. It was more so about making sure we leave something good for people to inherit after us or whatever. But it was worded in a very interesting way. Anyhow, last week we had talked about the moon. And that was basically kind of about subconscious illusions, that kind of thing as well. Shadow work as well. Is there anything else that you want to add to that kind of super quick rehash of it?
I think the only thing that I wanted to say is when we think about the moon, and we think of all things lunar as being inward and reflective. So that's why the shadow work and working with the moon is working with all that interior stuff. And so the thing that would come afterwards would obviously be the sun, which is like outward directed energy.
I never really thought of it that way. I'm grateful that you brought that up because that's a very good perspective on it. And even looking at the more like the Ryder-Smith weight one, there's the rays kind of radiating outwardly from it. So that's a very obvious symbol kind of now that you point that out. And then especially looking at kind of like the sunflowers coming up and all of that, there is this kind of outward radiating appearance. So before we get too much into the cards specifically, what is like the astrology associated with the sun?
Well, I know it's just going to blow your mind, but it's actually the sun.
What?
Whoa. So I think that it's interesting because the sun is obviously people, when they read their horoscope, they read for their sun sign because the sun is the brightest star in the sky and it's the center of our whole universe. So when we're reading astrology, if you are looking at a birth chart, you look at the sun and the moon as being your brightest luminaries. So the moon is your emotions, like we said, that reflective, inward, private response to things. And then the sun is your ego, and not your ego as in being an asshole, but just like what you're meant to do in this life. It's always funny that you always like have to mention that you're an asshole. You're over 30, right?
I'm 35, yeah.
Okay. So I was having a conversation in my like coven group chat this morning, and we were talking about solar progressions. And so basically you're born under the sun, like the sun sign that you're born under, and you're meant to be that. And the first 30 years, I feel like you get it in its purest form. So you're a Pisces, so you learn all the lessons of Pisces in its purest form. I'm a Leo. I learn all the lessons of Leo in its purest form. And then kind of when we get into our 30s, the sun, it takes like 30 years to move through a sign, and it progresses into the next. So that next like 30 to 60, give or take a couple of years, you're into the following sign. So you're into your Aries progression.
What does that mean?
Well, I think it's really cool because, you know, you went through all of those years in your Pisces of taking on the psychic debris of everything around you. Mm-hmm. And, you know, just from your story with addiction and moving and all of that, which led to your personal tower, and then your recovery and the rebuild really propelled you to start this business to not only heal yourself, but then give back. And that's a very Aries thing to do. Aries is the self. So you're self-reflecting, taking all of this knowledge that you've absorbed and all of your Pisces wisdom and experience, and then taking that on an individual's journey. So that's kind of another reason why we can't be so hard on ourselves in the beginning stages in like our mid 30s to like early 40s. That like new cycle through this progression is really showing you like now it's almost like a court card, like the double elements. So you've got like this, you know, baseline of Pisces, and now you're adding an Aries. So your baseline is water, and then you're adding fire, which is pretty cool. It's like Queen of Swords. So like you could look to Queen of Wands. So look to Queen of Wands to be kind of like your patron guide for the next 30 years.
I'm going to have to look at that more thoroughly now because I like that concept. I'm going to actually write that down.
Yeah. So I was like, I'm a Leo, so I have like a baseline of fire, and I've moved into Virgo. So now I'm finally getting some earth in my chart, which is interesting because now I moved around so much my entire life without having choice. And now I've chosen to make a home for myself here, set up some structure. I think I've mentioned many times of what a slob I used to be, and a hoarder and disorganized. And now I'm like extremely like leaning into that like mercurial, like having like things set up and structured, being like extremely minimalistic in ways I never thought I would. But like the last thing I'll say on that is then, you know, once we kind of reach the twilight years in the 60s and up, then you move into that third sign, and that's kind of like what you evolve into. So you're gonna, you know, if this offers you any sort of like feeling good about things, it's like you went from Pisces, then you went through Aries, and you'll finally end up a Taurus. And a Taurus is very comfortable in the material world. So you went from a place where you were very uncomfortable, and then learning how to create that for yourself so that you can enjoy it.
That makes sense. Yeah, I definitely would want to end up comfortable in the material world. Because it's definitely something where I haven't felt like I fit in before. So I'm moving into that now still, but It's good to know that I have some time to grow into that.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, that has nothing to do with the sun card, my friends, but I guess it does if you're looking at astrology and progressions and just, I don't know, if you're obsessed with self-reflection like I am and curious.
I think that was all incredibly useful information. I'm sure other people will, even though it was directed at me, it can still give them a touchstone to look at their own life.
Yeah, like anybody who's listening, like please look at the sign you're in, and if you haven't reached your 30s yet, just know you're still in your pure form. And as you move into your 30s and you go through your Saturn return, you're going to come through that cycle and you'll progress into the next sign.
I think that's good to know. Then people can have a little bit more hope. This is the last question I have on that. Is that linked to Saturn return directly? Because Saturn returns again in like what in your late 50s?
Yeah. So it could definitely be linked to that. It takes Saturn 29 years to go around your chart. And it's, progressions take 30 years. So it's all pretty linked. Anytime Saturn makes its it goes through everything, it's like kind of challenging you to rise to the occasion of maturity.
Thank you for that extra information. Yeah, I was curious. I guess if it's all a cycle and it all works together, it's all related anyhow in some way, shape, or form. So
yeah.
So looking at the sun card, we're going to start with yours, even though I kind of picked apart some of the Rider-Smith-Waite one. As always, I like your artwork greatly. I don't know why I'm showing you your card.
I love it. I show it back. I see you and raise you.
20 episodes into this, and I like that's awesome. So one of the things I really like about your sun is how you I guess obviously if it's black and white, you could not have black into it, but I like how you have the black in there. It's a very interesting way to present everything. And as far as the buildings themselves, is that like New York?
It is. It's the buildings of my first neighborhood in Brooklyn.
Okay.
I think, if we look at like what the sun represents as being kind of clarity, especially after the moon, after the tower, the sun seems like, a very like simple card of like, oh yeah, this is great. This is like a new dawn, and this is like clarity, and this is like happiness and joy, but it comes later. And it comes after going through so many tumultuous upheavals, through darkness. It's like you don't get this level of authentic clarity without having come through something.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, I never had a sun moment like I had when I moved into my very first apartment in my 30s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. Like for me, that's even just recently with just getting my own place and like actually being self-supporting again and not being like all drunk or high, and like being able to earn money doing what I'm passionate about and being self-supporting through that. Like it's an incredibly good feeling. And for a lot of people, they'd be like, well, I don't have enough. I'm not making enough money. But one of the things that I'm so grateful for is like over the course of the past couple of years of literally living with just kind of the bare necessities of everything, I've have such gratitude just for what I do have, even though a lot of people would still be like, this isn't good enough. I don't know. It's super, super awesome. And it goes in, I've been like banging a drum on the law of compensation, but it goes into the law of compensation in the sense of like going through having minimal things and really focusing and working on myself allows me to really enjoy the experience of something that the majority of people would take for granted or like completely overlook. So the universe always has your back if you're willing to look at it in the right light.
Yeah, I thank you for sharing that. That's absolutely what the sun card is about, and I couldn't agree with you more. I You know my story. I had everything and I had nothing. And now I have nothing, but I have everything.
Mm-hmm.
And to me,
That's
it's not
interesting.
nothing because the stuff that I do choose to keep around me, it's stuff that I love.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a really important thing as well. My life is filled with like books and teacups and like stuff like that. And like that's actually what matters to me, and tarot cards. Before it was all sorts of really empty experiences. So it's interesting how that works. One of the things in the Smith weight card, and I'm curious if this is kind of your corollary between it, is the sunflowers. Are the buildings your corollary to the sunflowers, or they're just kind of their own entity?
The building's actually a corollary to the baby.
To the baby.
To the baby.
Explain that.
So the baby, it's really interesting because there's so many different schools of thought on what the baby represents. And for those of you listening that maybe don't work with the Rider Smith weight deck, it has, you know, the sun coming up and there's like a little baby riding on a horse and there's sunflowers all around it. And what I believe the baby is, that like that birth of something new. It's not necessarily a child. It can be a child. It totally can be a child. But it's the birth of new ideas, a new concept, a new identity, a new way of being in the world. You know, these are cosmic cards. We're into like the cosmic realm of tarot. So that building for me represented a new way of living.
Okay.
I think that if anything, I feel like I see myself as a sunflower because I feel like that has a more human experience. It's like flowers have a season
Mm-hmm.
where they bloom. They go to, you know, at night the sunflowers go to sleep, and in the day they're energized. Especially sunflowers are like, they are always leaning towards the sun, and they actually turn towards one another. If they see the one next to them needing energy and needing a lift, they kind of, their blooms face one another and they can share energy.
Oh wow.
And so I definitely feel like I, as a person, would be the sunflower, and the way that I'm choosing to live in the world would be the baby.
Hmm. I like that. So the sunflower is you kind of looking out at the sun and the buildings and the cards. You're like a
Yeah.
sunflower on somebody's windowsill.
That would have been smart if I would have put a sunflower, like, but I didn't think about that.
I think it's fine without it. Like, I like your card without it. I was just curious. One of
Yes,
the things that I would say about the. No, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
No,
You go.
you go.
We could play this game all day. I forgot what I was going to say. You go.
Oh man, I was gonna say that the baby is just like that fresh perception, like literally seeing the world with newborn eyes or something like that. And the question that I had is, because of the 1 and the 9, wouldn't that also carry the energy of like the Fool, but in like a more pure form in some way?
Yeah.
Because of the 0 aspect of adding the 1 and 9 together.
Well, and then you look at like the 1 being the magician, the 9 being the hermit. And then together, 1 and 9 would be 10. So then you have Wheel of Fortune in there.
So there's all sorts of stuff, and it's like condensing that into a form.
Yeah. That's, you know, again, with the cosmic cards, the higher the numbers, the more like layered and textural the meanings are. If people were just, you know, when you're offering readings and maybe the person that you're reading for, the sitter isn't as esoteric as we are, you can always look at the sun to be a yes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you need a yes card, that's a yes card.
Absolutely.
And depending on the other cards that might be around it, you can see is like a shifting of energy or a shifting of perspective or a shifting of just what's happening.
That's definitely one of the things. This is one of the cards where it can kind of affect every other card in the reading, I feel like, and kind of cast a positive light on it.
Mm-hmm.
And even the reversal of it isn't, I don't really take in a negative way. It's just kind of like there's a little bit more work to be done or you're almost there.
Yeah, like clarity's on its way.
Mm-hmm.
Like even if sometimes I feel like it's overthinking, you know, if you're looking for an answer and you're overthinking it, I think it's like, okay, you know, just step back, do something different, do something that brings you more joy, because obviously it's the sun. And then that clarity can kind of drop in.
So the reverse sun is a chill the fuck out for a second. Like everything will be cool.
Yeah. Either that or depending on the other cards, sometimes I just tell, I read the sun reversed or upright the same.
I guess that is an important thing. It's all about the context of what else is around it. What would you say your bullet points are for the sun specifically?
I think the thing that comes up the most for me is clarity and shifting and like new.
What about like growth too?
Yeah, I love that.
I want to run through kind of the energy of the other cards that are associated with it numerologically as well. So you said the Magician, which is kind of power and action and creativity. Yes. Then the Hermit, which is the self-reflection, introspection. And what's another word that you would add to that? Or another 2 or 3?
When I think about the Hermit and just the number 19 in general, the 9 always carries all of the energies of every card or every number that came before it.
Okay.
So they've already experienced the individual, duality, community, you know, the material realm versus spiritual, action, change, like all of those things. They've already experienced all of it. And the Hermit really goes into their own. They have the only way to get to the next level is to go inward, which I think really works with like having the Moon be the card that comes before this. You can't have any clarity or new insights without going inward first.
That's definitely very, very true. And then you had also said the Wheel of Fortune, and that's just kind of good outcome, warm things coming. Maybe that's not the best word. What would you say for the Wheel of Fortune?
Well, I think about the Wheel of Fortune being just the wheel of life and how it's always turning. And sometimes you're at the top and sometimes you're at the bottom. And just knowing that the happiest that you feel in any given moment is just temporary, just like the lowest you can and saddest, most depressed you can feel at any given moment is also just temporary.
Okay. So I'm going to try to tie this all together and see if I get it right based upon all of the energies of those cards. So basically the ability to understand this cycle is, which leads to this happiness, is crafted from the ability to reflect upon all of your previous experiences and integrate them into your understanding. And that's actually what creates all of this deep joy, by being able to sift through all of everything for lessons and use that to kind of create your moment now.
That's very, very good. I think that a lot of people don't, not that they don't understand, but they refuse to be I don't know why, but just for some reason, a lot of people think that the pursuit of happiness and pleasure is that it's possible that you can feel good all the time. And that they don't realize that, yeah, you're going to feel like really low sometimes. And you need that to balance out. Like the light needs the dark.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in the Sun card, that's when you really make peace with that. And you realize that all of the shitty feelings definitely lead somewhere, and like nothing is done for no cause. Like every moment is a gift, whether it makes you feel like shit or you feel elated or you just feel like it was a moment. Like everything is. So I think I just think like in general society is conditioned to be like pain avoidant. And so many people, in order to avoid pain, they don't actually lean into true joy, because they know to experience pure joy and bliss, you have to also go through pain. So they just ride the midline and have a life of meh.
There was this thing by, I want to say it was Alan Watts, and he was talking about the thing about suffering is the more you suffer, the more you increase your capacity for joy. But then the more you increase your capacity for joy, the more you can potentially suffer. And I do think that, especially, I hate to always beat up on the New Age, but I think that's one of the big failings of the New Age is their overemphasis on one particular attribute and then ignoring the other one, because it creates an imbalance. But then also whenever they experience anything that's unpleasant, it kind of blows it out of proportion.
That could be. Maybe I don't engage enough with the New Age, that like I hear this a lot, but I don't know. I feel like the like, I don't know, Instagram accounts that I follow and the people that I engage with are very in touch with like the pain that they've gone through.
Yeah, it just might be me in this one Facebook group that I've been a part of. It was a part of my early journey, and it might just be something that I've outgrown to where I just harbor like a lot of negative energy around it.
Yeah, like, and I've realized too that the things that make me feel negatively about, where I can't seem to shift it on my own, then I just need to like walk away from it.
Yeah, I mean, the only reason I'm still in there is because it's a good place, I feel like, to potentially get clients or help people. But I don't know that that's probably the most.
Those probably aren't your clients, my friend.
Yeah, that's probably a fair point as well. um, So what would you say, like, I don't have anything else to add about the Sun. I feel like we've covered kind of the general gist of it, but I'll leave that opportunity for you to say whatever else you would like to add.
I think the only thing that I would add is that it's interesting that on the Rider-Waite-Smith, there's one baby, where on like a lot of other decks, there's always two babies.
Okay.
And I think that this is really interesting because the two babies were supposed to represent the two sides, like the duality of human nature, and how in the Sun they're coming together.
I can respect that. Yeah, it does make a lot more sense than having the one. I'm curious why they did only do one. I'm sure that it's written down somewhere, at least somebody's thought process.
Yeah, if anybody wants to chat with us about that. I mean, there's people that believe that like they represented Castor and Pollux, and there's other schools of thought that think that like in like early, I guess maybe it's Christian philosophy that like when humans were created, they were both masculine and feminine. and they were just one. So the baby is that representation of masculine and feminine.
So theirs is like the completed process of the unification.
Right.
What you're saying? Okay.
Yes. So when, everybody was happy because we were all one, and then, for whatever reason, God split and made men and women. And so we've gone through this whole evolution for so many years in relationships because we're looking for our other half. Because we're not actually supposed to be split. And so I think that a lot of things, like if you wanted to get really deep and out there, you can think about this evolution, because you can look at the sun as an evolutionary card, and how the evolution of human sexuality, where you have so many people coming out as non-binary, because people are no longer, the evolution is no longer looking for, as a woman, looking for my masculine counterpart, because I've now found my own masculine within me, and it was always there.
Yeah, that's kind of the alchemical wedding concept. I definitely think that, like on my own personal journey, that's one of the things that I had to learn to balance, is both energies within myself. And I mean, even throughout esoteric stuff, that concept is represented in like Baphomet or whatever, if you look at it, because it's both genders. And I guess I could see this as kind of being, what's the word, an innocent androgyny, because you can't really determine anything about the baby's sex specifically.
Exactly. So if the sun card is innocent androgyny that comes through this like big process of upheaval, the world is mature androgyny. And then in between them, you have judgment, and judgment is that acceptance that we don't have to be these assigned roles.
I mean, even in Native American culture, they had what was called like twin-spirited individuals, if I'm not mistaken, where it was the same concept of kind of having both genders within one soul. In Thai occultism, they have it where there's kind of transgender shamans or witch doctors as well. So it really is something that's kind of cross-culturally noted on that unification of both energies. And I think for some people, it can take a different form of physical attraction to both things or whatever, like whatever works for the individual. But I also think that it can be like, let me get clarity on this. Non-binary, what does that actually mean?
It's when you don't subscribe to eat. Yeah, I'm not a he, I'm not a she, I'm a they.
Okay. I guess I'm still a he, so that doesn't identify to me. But it's cool if it works for other people. I was just curious of like what it meant, because I've never had the ability to ask anybody before. So
it's definitely something that is in conversation every day of my life. And the type of, like, I'm very fortunate to live in a very progressive place, and to have all of these like very progressive concepts that are happening alongside my spiritual studies. And like, I would definitely say like and identify as she, but it's been a wonderfully interesting experience to no longer search for my he, and to instead look within, like in the looking in and finding that within myself. It's changed like my relationship dynamics, and honestly helped me understand men so much better. Because as women, we've tapped so heavily into masculine energy in a way to be seen in as equals. So for a woman to be seen as equal to a man, she's got to be in masculine energy. Yet there's never been a safe time or place for men to be equal to women.
Mm-hmm. I think that's one of the big reasons that there's so many problems that men have right now, because they're not allowed to integrate that part of themselves, and they're unbalanced, like spiritually unbalanced and literally unbalanced in lots of ways.
Right. So because society doesn't allow them to be in their feminine energy, because it's honestly like so grotesque, that they instead lean further into their masculine, and it reaches these toxic levels.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's like obviously like in process of its tower, that's like crumbling down now. So my goal in everything that I do is to try to like, I don't say like the future is female, like the future is non-binary. The future is being both within yourself and seeing it within other people. And I feel like that's the sun. That's the essence of the sun card to me. Is being uniting both masculine and feminine to become your whole person, because that also changes all of our relationships. There's a lot of times people, when they sit there and they're like, this is the relationship I want, they're acting from a place of working through their own psychological problems, where people, like women, date their father over and over again because it's all they know. But it's like, if they can heal and integrate those masculine and feminine energies within themselves, like imagine experiencing a relationship where you weren't looking outside yourself to get something.
I think that's incredibly important. There's a lot that I want to touch on, and I'm going to try to do it quickly. So I really like how you brought up that the future isn't like exerting this feminine force, it's this non-binary thing, because I think one of the big things that I see in a lot of spiritual communities is the rise of the feminine. And I do think that feminine energy needs to be experienced and expressed more, but to some it's almost this overstatement and this polarizing of masculine energy, where masculine energy in and of itself isn't bad, it's the expression of it, due to men not being allowed to show this other side. But then at the same time, if men show this other side, they're still vilified in some way, shape, or form by people from all walks of life. Men actually have a lot harder job or like a lot harder role to fill than I think most people understand. And it's interesting because the guys that get it get a lot of shit from people that like about the guys that don't get it, and they get labeled into the same thing. Being a straight white man, I hear all of this stuff about how bad they are, and then also being empathic and having my own issues. It's very difficult to like have a conversation about how that attitude's unhealthy with people, because they want to view me as like not being present or aware with what they're actually talking about. But it's saying I understand that, but you're not understanding this other side of it, to where you can't bring somebody to your side by beating them on the head with the hammer or by insulting them. It just doesn't work. The other thing that I thought you said that was really great, though, is that whole aspect of relationship and like having that relationship with yourself. As somebody who's been single for close to 7 years now, and really going on this journey, and my dynamic of how I date has changed a lot. But then recently, really coming to the conclusion that I just need to stop trying to meet somebody and just continue to work on me and just like be okay with me in a big way, which I am okay with me. But then thinking that somebody else is going to take my life to this next level or whatever. One, that's not how it works. Like, it's not really going to change much of anything beyond having somebody. But then two, coming from that space of lack, I shouldn't say normally, I always settled for less than what I deserved romantically. So now getting to a space of just saying, I'll meet the right person at the right time if I'm supposed to. And if not, that's okay too. I think that that's a lot healthier space to be in. Like, one last thing on all of this too, like, I was driving back from the gym today and I was thinking about like, I've always had this story, like my grandparents, they, before my grandfather passed, they celebrated like 70 years of being married or something. And I was like, I want to have that extended period of a relationship with someone. But then I really thought about it, like, is it honestly the matter of years that you spend with somebody, or is it the matter of quality of the years that you spend with a person? And for me, that was like a big game changer. So it's a lot of those lessons, and then understanding that it's not about time, but what it actually means with that person. So I might meet somebody and have a 1 year relationship with them, and that could be a lot more substantial than, I don't want to say 70 years. My grandparents had a good relationship, but whatever somebody else might have, like 20 years, you can have one really good year or 20 shitty years. So what does it really matter?
That's true. I think that the part of all of this, and also in the Sun and having that clarity, is that relationships are shifting, and I think that people are starting to realize that the way we view the world is completely an individual experience. So we don't actually ever even see one another clearly.
Mm-hmm.
We're all mirrors. Every relationship is a mirror. And so a lot of times we think when we get into a relationship that somebody is so great, and yes, it's like that elevated loving experience, but really you're just seeing your own greatness reflected back to you through that other person. And
That's
it's
a really
like,
great outlook.
It is, because then you sit there and you're like, okay, how can I see that greatness without that mirror? I think that when you find a way to see your greatness without a reflected mirror, that's when you're ready and you meet a person.
What's super funny though too is like when you can see the greatness and you feel so great about that person, that's like, wow, I really am doing pretty awesome. But then when you get to that sour spot in the relationship and you're like, this miserable motherfucker, how did I end up with this piece of shit?
Right. Well, because that's usually when that's usually the point where you start to see the other person, and it's no longer the reflection of yourself, because then you realize I'm still the exact same person I was with or without this other person. And then you become able to see them for who they are. And you're like, oh, this actually is not aligned for me. Or you went through what you needed to go through with them, and that moment is like done. Like you completed the cycle and the contract is over.
I mean, I wonder though too if sometimes the mirror's still up, and then like your own behavior from yourself is actually revealed. This is the last thing I'll say on this, and then I'll kind of leave it for you for closing comments. For me in relationships, I found that a lot of my behavior earlier on was a lot of masks and kind of motivated with different energy behind it. But then once I got to the actual me, the other person changed because I changed. And then it's like the disgust that I felt with the other person changing was actually still me. Does that make sense? Like it was the mirror the whole time, because I don't know that I've ever actually dated anybody and saw them clearly. Like,
that's huge. I think that that's an interesting thing. And I kind of felt similarly, where when I got divorced and I spent like the first year alone, living in my apartment, living alone, and having to clean up after myself, and having to pay all the bills on my own, and having to like only be with me, I realized like how like healing that relationship was, but how I was really coming at it from a place of, I was in that relationship because I wanted love and affection and attention from my father that I didn't have. And my ex gave me that, and that like soothed my inner child. And I came from like a home life that had a lot of psychic upheaval and a lot of like yelling and screaming, and there was no quiet and calm. So I chose somebody that was so far that like he would never fight with me or argue with me. He just wouldn't engage. So it was like, I realized finally at the end, I was like, oh, you know what? this is too much this way. I grew up too much this way. My marriage was too much this way. Maybe I need to figure out what my midline is before I can go into another relationship. So I think relationships are our greatest teachers, but they're really like showing you more about yourself. And a lot of people get into like blaming their partners for their unhappiness when it's like, no, that's your job. And also, we can't get someone to love us by being anything other than who we are. You know, if we have to put on those masks, which I've done plenty of times, then that, you know, you've created this persona because we enjoy the response to that persona that the person gives us. And then when we obviously we can't keep that up forever. And when we get exhausted, we have to take it off, and then the person is like, ugh. And then we like feel rejected, and that's
one thing that kind of just blew my mind from that whole thing was this whole aspect of putting on the persona is because we feel unlovable, or that's why I did it, at least. Like I felt unlovable as I was.
We all do, yeah.
And it's interesting because like you keep acting this way and you're like, well, like there's this positive reinforcement of that behavior. But then like you had said, when it switches over and the mask falls, it goes into reaffirming how worthless you are as yourself.
And I'm offering that is not the case. If people could stop looking at it that way, that their true self is unworthy, then it's just like, to me, the obvious answer is that person that you're with isn't the right person because they can't love you in your authenticity. Then kick it back to yourself, and that's saying that you can't love your authenticity.
Yeah, that's what it goes back to, is self-love, because if you loved yourself, first off, you wouldn't want to put a mask up anyhow, and secondly, you wouldn't want to be with somebody that wanted you to be anything but what you actually were.
Right.
Which is a big trip. It's a mind fuck because our culture shows us the exact opposite of that. That's a whole different tangent, though.
It is, but I think that with the rise of with the rise of, you know, podcasts and a huge movement away from these big conglomerate programming, you can kind of like seek out people that you resonate with that are giving like these types of honest answers. You know, you can curate what you see now. So you don't have to ever engage in the stuff that still subscribes to these very antiquated like concepts.
I think that is important, and I do think that that's one of the great things about the internet and kind of the independence of media and attitudes, is that it really allows people to select that and kind of outlearn these old modes that just aren't true and don't work. Ranji, quit chewing my thumb, dude. But yeah, that's really all I have to say on that. Like, I really liked that whole little tangent that we went off on, because I think that's super important. And that's one of the reasons that I've really enjoyed doing a lot of this series with you, is because there is a lot of thought-provoking stuff that comes up just from the cards themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I really appreciate you always being like a supportive container to go off on these tangents, because, you know, I have these conversations within, you know, my bubble. It's really nice to like extend it and, you know, get an outside perspective, because we don't always get to like talk like this. So I hope everybody enjoyed our sun discussion, and I hope it helps everybody kind of think about, like, you know, what those shifts in perspective within your own life, but also like on a cultural scale. I think tarot really goes with the cultural journey that we're on right now. We're in such a renaissance time, and I don't think people understand it because they're in the situation.
Yeah, you have to kind of pull yourself out of it and look at it in the context of everything else going on, like within the timeline of now, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's curious. I'm curious to see where everything goes from here, I guess. But if people can channel the sun energy, things will work out as they're supposed to, and they can kind of weather the darker times. Got to have a little sunshine in your pocket.
Yes, that is true.
Well,
All right.
Stefanie, thank you so much. People listening, I do want to say, if you have any questions or comments, you can reach out to us on social media. The information will be below. If you would like to buy Stefanie's tarot deck, you can get it from moonvoidtarot.com or etsy.com/shop/moonvoidtarot. And that's all I've got. Stefanie, you want to take us out with your beautiful words of wisdom?
I think the microphone's getting taken away from me. I think I've spoken enough. But thank you, everybody. We really appreciate you listening and reaching out. And we'll see you next week. We're going to talk about judgment.
Thanks for listening to the Spiritual Phoenix podcast. If you've got a question you want answered, a topic you'd like discussed, or a guest you want to hear, check out the forum in the show notes. Follow our social media for other great content.